Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Dr. Soul Brother with you here with a remedy to help cure your ills. Because Lord knows we got a lot of them. Let me get right to the point here. As you can see and hear, folk have decided to become troublemakers again regarding our Divine Nine organizations. I did a show um, some months ago and um, uploaded it, re-uploaded it on Monday regarding our Divine Nine organizations, and I see that people have decided to go in on them again. So therefore, Dr. Soul Brother is compelled to give robust pushback on this. Now, there's a sister who's on YouTube named Lady Boule, and I want to say publicly, I endorse her. Lady Boule, keep doing the work that you're doing. We speak in the same language, not just as it relates to um, the Divine Nine organizations, but our Black American culture at large. But let me go on into this. So this would be like a follow up to my uh, show called "Leave the Divine Nine Alone," and I mean that. Need to leave our fraternities and sororities alone. First of all, let me go into this for those who don't seem to understand it or seem to be, um, you know, something going on upstairs. Um, our black fraternities and sororities were founded back in the day, like in the early 1900s, as one of our institutions as a way to help Black America, those on the collegiate level, but also by extension, those, let's say, who were not in college would benefit. By that I mean um, you had to be a member and still have to be a member. You have to be a college student or college graduate to be initiated into the organization. No problem. But it cannot be denied that if you are black in the black community, you have benefited in some form or fashion, whether it's, let's say, a scholarship for your child going to college or some type of housing etc. You have benefited in some form or fashion. The overall community has benefited. So let's not sit here and act like um, our fraternities and sororities are dead weight. They are not. And I know you don't want me to go into who's really dead weight, and I will later on. But here's the thing: I'm going to mention a few prominent members, people like Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Belford Lawson, Charles H. Wesley. Um, those are alpha men. Paula Giddings, Delta Sigma Theta. Vice President Kamala Harris, Alpha Kappa Alpha. Esther Roll, Zeta Phi Beta. Constance Baker Motley, Alpha Kappa Alpha. Dr. Betty Shabazz, Delta Sigma Theta. Huey P. Newton, Phi Beta Sigma. Yes, revolutionary Huey P. Newton, Phi Beta Sigma. And let's not forget that before the Black Panther Party was even founded, as a young college student, he pledged Phi Beta Sigma while involved with the Afro American Association, which shows what? His level of Black consciousness in the 1960s, again, prior to early 1960s, prior to the formation of the Black Panther Party. Let me continue. Um, and there are many others, too numerous to mention right now. But um, I want to say this. I would encourage, highly encourage, the listeners in the clouds who, um, under the sound of my voice, to do research, to research the Brooke Amendment, um, and that was by Senator Edward Brooke, another alpha man, okay, a senator in Massachusetts back in the day. He's since passed on, but look him up and look up the Brooke Amendment, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Um, I have to do this because this is important. It needs to be made crystal clear Crystal clear. The divine nine, whether you're talking about the alphas, kappas, the omegas, the sigmas, the iotas, AKs, deltas, zetas, and sigma gamma rhos, are not enemies of black folk. Let me repeat that. None of the divine nine organizations are enemies of black folk. Let's be clear. Um, at the same time that I say that, it needs to be noted that the divine nine is to blame for some of this vitriol that divine nine has been receiving. Why do I say that? If you go back to the 1980s, 80s and 90s actually, there was a big push against the divine nine organizations. Big push by people who were members of the quote unquote conscious community. For example, anybody who's familiar with the Afrocentric uh, lecturer Ashra Kwesi, he was one of those who led the charge. I'm not going to sit here and say that he is the one, he is the person who led the charge, but he was one of them clearly. You talk to anybody who's old enough to remember back in the 80s and 90s, Ashra Kwesi was one of those who did that. And when I look at this, I say, well, this is bad enough. And simultaneously, what was happening? The movie School Days by Spike Lee. Now, let me be clear. I like the movie School Days. Okay. In fact, I was just watching it the other day. It's a good movie. Just like I would like the movie. Um, what's the movie with? It was another movie that was done in 2006, 2007. Stomp the Yard. Okay. Um, which dealt with the fraternities and sororities. Because I know somebody who had problem with both films, especially the Stomp the Yard. But this is an individual who's anti the black fashion sororities because they bought into this notion that they're the enemies of the people, which again is fundamentally false. But let me continue. Um, I have to criticize the Divine Nine for not giving robust pushback. In fact, not giving pushback at all as it relates to this. See, the thing is, had we given pushback in a robust way, much of this vitriol that we see going on would not have escalated to this point. Now it's been taken to another level. First, people like Astro Crazy were being critical of our Greek letter organizations because, first of all, he said, I remember he said, how can you call yourself a Greek? Okay, let me break that down. First of all, uh, the only Greek thing about our Greek letter organizations are the letters. Are the letters. Okay? Anybody who plays a fraternity or sorority will tell you that much of the history that you learn not only does it deal with the um, the founders and the history of the organization, but also it's rooted in Black history. You're not trying to study the history of Greece, nor are you trying to be a Greek in that sense and referring to Greece as the homeland. No, it's understood that Africa is the is the motherland and all the rest of it, and it's deeply rooted in our history in this country. One of our scholars, may he rest in peace, Dr. John Hope Franklin, who was a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He wrote several books. Most notably, he's noted for his book From Slavery to Freedom. I would encourage you, if you have not read that book, to read it and study it very carefully. He wrote that in the late 1940s, I believe 1947. You're gonna turn around and act like he's a problem? Some of the same. It's interesting. Shows you how schizophrenic some of us are. Some of the people who want to throw shade on our Greek letter organizations admire prominent black folks who are members of those organizations. To the moderate to the most radical. Okay, you know the name Harold Van Moore, aka Khalid Abdul Muhammad. Did y'all know that he was a member of uh, Kappa? I mean, Omega Psi-Phi? He pledged at uh, Dillard University in New Orleans in the late 1960s. I want to say 1967, somewhere there about. I believe 1967. Um, and you see how radical he was. You're gonna sit up and act like okay, another person, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, a member of Zeta Phi Beta. Again, a woman with race consciousness. And I'm going to go back to the name of Charles H. Wesley, who was a historian, who was a professor, who was a Methodist minister, who was a race man, simply put. Simply put. Okay? Um, Charles Hamilton, the lawyer, he was a race man. Who was the other race man? Um, Rayford Logan. Look his name up. I would encourage you to look all of these folks' names up I'm referencing right now. Look them up, be they male or female, in fraternities and sororities. Paula Giddings, When and Where I Enter, the impact of black women on race and sex in America. She also wrote In Search of Sisterhood. She also wrote a excellent biography on Mrs. Ida B. Wells. Okay? Paula Giddings, race woman. Again, there's so many names, it's too many names, they're too numerous to go down a list. We'd be here all night. But here's the point. To act like or be convinced that these folks are enemies of black folk is insane. Now, I referenced Ashra Kwesi a moment ago, as if that wasn't bad enough. You know what made it worse, or who made it worse? A man by the name of Steve Coakley, who suggested that our fraternities, sororities, and by extension, the those who are members of the Prince Hall and Scottish Rite Mason and Eastern Stars and the Links, etc., are somehow in bed with white supremacists. That took it to another level. That took it to another. But then, in most recent times, this thing suggesting that our fraternities and sororities are anti-God? Okay, that's it. I said, okay, no, 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 we can't have this. That's really a bridge too far. I thought the other stuff was bad enough, and it is. But this right here, oh no. But you see, this is because too many of our brothers and sisters in our fraternities and sororities did not speak up. I tried to explain to a woman whose name I won't mention the sorority that she's in, that there should have been pushback. I told her this a few years ago. There should have been pushback as it relates to people who are naysayers and haters. And um, she was somewhat dismissive of it. Well, you see, that's been the problem. Too many of us are dismissive of very serious issues. Whenever there's a problem and it is not dealt with accordingly, it will snowball and fester. What Dr. Soul Brothers is saying straight up, because this wasn't dealt with 30 plus years ago, it is now spiraled out of control. It is now spiraled out of control. So, for that, some of this, frankly, is self inflicted wounds. This is what this represents. And I'm saying this to my Divine Nine brothers and sisters self inflicted. Let me continue. The Divine Nine represent boot camps for leadership. I'm going to say it again. The Divine Nine represent boot camps for leadership. Look at the people, prominent people. Again, moderate to militant or revolutionary. Um, they represent leadership in some capacity. Okay? Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Hosea Williams, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and a host of others. Reverend was it Andy Young, etc. You have mayors, other politicians, um, host of other people. And this is my thing. You want to act like folks in the fraternities and sororities are enemies of black folk? Then you show me where people like uh show us rather, not just me, but show us people like Larry Elder, Candace Owens, Tim Scott, and others of that ilk are members of the Divine Nine. I'll wait. I'll wait. Show me. Matter of fact, yeah, You comment in the comments section. Leave a comment in the comments section, and show me where folks of that ilk are members of the Divine Nine. I'll wait. Show me. Show us. Okay? You ain't gonna find them. Um, I mentioned the thing about Huey P. Newton being a member of Phi Beta Sigma. Yes, and he was a also a Prince Hall Mason. A Prince Hall Mason. Dr. Betty Shabazz and Mrs. Merle Evers, the widows of Malcolm X and Medgar Evers, they were not only kindred spirits as a result of them being widows of two prominent black leaders, but also they were proud members of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. So there was a bond between those two that was eternal. That was eternal. Okay. Dr. Betty Shabaz's daughter, Malcolm X's daughter as well, Miss Ilyasa Shabazz is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta. Mrs. Coretta Scott King, Alpha Kappa Alpha. Her daughter, Dr. Bernice King, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Dr. King's son, Martin Luther King III, proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Medgar Evers was a Prince Hall Mason. And there's no doubt in my mind, and I'm going to go here with this, whether you like it or not, that if Malcolm X had had the chance to complete his formal education and gone on to complete a college education, there is no doubt in my mind that he, and had gone on to become a lawyer, he too would be or would have been a member of the Divine Nine, would have either been an Alpha or an Omega. I'm convinced. I'm just saying. Now stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Let me continue. Um, this is the other part that's problematic. Uh, there was a woman named Deborah Riley Draper, who's a filmmaker, who produced a film, documentary on the on Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Well, she herself is a member, proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. She does excellent work. I'm very impressed with the work I've seen of hers. A documentary she did dealt with the Olympics in 1936 with the Black American members of the American team, Jesse Owens, and a host of others. People focus on Jesse Owens, but he wasn't just himself. Ralph Metcalf, but who also was a member of the Divine Nine, who was an Alpha, etc. You know, yeah, people like that. Um, host of others. I said their names are too numerous. But what bothers me is that when you have somebody like Mrs. Draper, who clearly does work pertaining to our history and culture, you want to be dismissive of folk like that. I have a problem with that, a real problem. And that needs to end. This suggestion that the Divine Nine is in bed with white supremacists is just horrible. And this thing that the Divine Nine is anti-God. You got these folks online on YouTube talking about their denunciation. Well, guess what? If you have a problem with the organization and you don't want to be a member anymore, you're free to do that. You are free to do that. Nobody's stopping you. But when you turn around and demonize, I dare say, demonize our organizations that served, again, you've all heard me say this before about serving as a bridge over troubled waters, that is a problem. And that's when you're in the doghouse with me, Dr. Soul Brother. You're in a doghouse with me. I don't care who you are or who you think you are. You've crossed the line. And I'm gonna tell you something else. Another thing that gets me. It's interesting to note. Um, you know that there are white fraternities and sororities. Always have been. Even before we created our own. And in more recent years, in the Latino community, the Latinos have created their fraternities and sororities. Would you believe that they were inspired by us? Okay. They were inspired by, not by the white fraternity sorority, by the black ones. And yet, none of those white or Latino fraternities and sororities throw their organizations under the bus. None of them do. If you doubt me, check it out. Urge you to check it out. None of them do that. Nobody. Nobody does that what we do. we engage in suicidal behavior. Suicidal. No, this right here burns me up. It really does. And I would also encourage y'all to reject, with a capital R in this case, the rhetoric of somebody like a Steve Coakley, because Steve Coakley represented sour grapes. This is a man who wanted to be a Q, aka Omega, and didn't make it. And so what you saw and heard from him were sour grapes, straight up sour grapes. So that's a problem. He superimposed his personal hang up on everybody else, and it's had effect. And I would strongly encourage you to reject it. Reject it. No, no. This shaming and guilting of membership in the Divine Nine is a problem and needs to cease. This is what happened with Khalid Muhammad. He was shamed and guilted. That is why you never saw him with his Omega Sci-Fi apparel. This is one of the reasons why, or the main reason I should say, why he was inactive. He wasn't active. He didn't go to no conventions and nothing like that. And truth be told, one of the other people who was shamed and guilted was Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. They were around. I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead, but I got to keep it 100. People like them, people like Khalid Muhammad, um, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Asa Hilliard, folk like that, they were. Asa Hilliard was a member of Omega Sci-Fi. I cite these people because they were popular in the Afrocentric community. So, and during that time period, uh, there was negative rhetoric as it related to membership and affiliation with our fraternities and sororities. And yet, none of those individuals I just mentioned gave pushback. When did you ever hear Dr. Welsing or Asa Hilliard uh, announce or raise the banner of their fraternity and sorority? Didn't happen. And I make the argument that had they done that, things would have been much different. But I'm going to wrap this up here because I don't want to be in here too long. This is really upsetting me. It really is. For you folk to come on online. And let me, before I even continue with that, the young woman who decided at Howard University to pledge Delta Sigma Theta, only to, after I think 30 days, renounce and denounce her membership, hey, that's a problem. What's your real motive for going into the organization like that? To, after only 30 days or so, decide to reject it? Why would you do that? No, you're not loyal to nobody. You're not loyal to nothing. I'm telling you now, that kind of a behavior doesn't exist among the white fraternities and sororities. It doesn't exist among the Latinos in their fraternity sororities. It does not. It does not. That's a problem. And you are a problem. So here's the deal. Um, what needs to happen is that there needs to really be a screening process as it relates to this. And if you turn around and do that kind of a turncoat behavior, you need to be persona non grata and straight shunned. Shunned like you don't exist. Because that right there is represents a Judas factor. Straight up Judas factor. So no, no. This right here, this thing about that's really upping the ante, suggesting that our black fraternities and sororities are anti-God. How? You have people who are ministers. You have people who are of the faith. They don't have to be ministers, uh, who are proud members of the fraternities and sororities. Don't you know? I just cited to you a man by the name of Charles H. Wesley, who wrote several books as it relates to Alpha Phi Alpha and Prince Hall Mason and the Boule, etc. And that's the other thing. Um, Steve Coakley didn't know what he was talking about, throwing shade on the Boule. And that's the other thing. People who are members of the Boule, people who are members of the uh, Prince Hall Mason, Scottish Rite, Eastern Star, um, other and who are members of the Divine Nine fraternity and sororities. For God's sake, for all of our sakes, speak up. Don't allow this younger generation to be caught up in the bull crap that the generation 30 years ago were caught up in. This has had a terrible, terrible effect. And it needs to stop right now. And for you to sit back and not give any pushback makes you part of the problem, makes you complicit in this madness. You got to speak up. Don't you dare allow somebody to try to shame and guilt you in your organization that has served the community well. That's similar to what people have done in other areas where they try to shame and guilt us of our what? American identity, which is a whole nother conversation. Okay? But it's all connected. It's all connected. But I'm telling you right now, Dr. Soul Brother will be breathing down your neck every turn, every chance I get. At every turn, I'm gunning for you, gunning for you. There's no way you're going to be allowed to do that. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. So I am with Lady Boule with this. And if Lady Boule, you're out there listening, you have uh, a comrade in arms right now. I stand shoulder to shoulder with you and others who giving pushback. No, at every turn, you're going to hear from me. I promise you that. Promise you that. So you're anti the organization and you're an outsider, stay back and keep your mouth shut. Or if you're a person who wants to denounce your membership, stand back, sit back, and keep your mouth shut and stay out of this. Just bow out quietly. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do. But all this other stuff, wanting to suggest that things are ungodly, and all that kind, you don't know what you're talking about. And again, for the umpteenth time, it's interesting to note you show me anywhere within any white folks who are in fraternities and sororities that have been around since forever. And they don't do that. And the Latinos definitely don't do that. So get it together, fam. Get it together. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and be sure to comment because I want to hear from you. And until the next time, God bless.